From Corbyn to Trump, populism has rejected established political elites. Some think a return to ideology and emotion is a dangerous backward step. Others that this means that the alternatives have failed. There's populism on both the left and the right, but is it something to be celebrated or feared? Can giving more power to the people bring about positive and lasting change? Or is the only safe way to make progress to give it all to those who know best? Well, to discuss these subjects, we have, I think, the best qualified possible panel that we could have here, and that's shown by the huge size of the audience we have here today. On the left-hand side, we have Jon Lansman, who's become very prominent in recent years as the national organizer for Momentum, the 40,000-strong group that supports and provides intellectual ballast for the Corbyn leadership of the Labour Party. But Jon has a much longer history as an activist for a variety of causes, going all the way back to the days of Margaret Thatcher, I think, not least. Also not unacquainted with Margaret Thatcher, I think, is the guest on my right-hand side, the Right Honourable Michael Howard, who of course was leader of the Conservative Party, but also served prior to that as a cabinet minister in a variety of roles, including Secretary of State for the Environment, and a distinguished and experienced observer of Conservative politics. Also a distinguished observer of Conservative politics, but perhaps one who has changed the position of her viewing platform, is Anna Soubry, former business minister under the Cameron government, Conservative Member of Parliament for Broxtowe, who earlier this year switched to the new independent group, the TIGS as they're known, which of course has now taken up the party title of Change UK. Three people with a tremendous amount to contribute this afternoon. Would you welcome them all here again? We'd like to hear 3 minutes from each of our panelists on the key question that we're asking: is populism, both on the left and the right, something to be celebrated or something to be feared? Jon Lansman.
Thanks. Well, first of all, I'm not quite sure that populism really is a thing. But if it is, it's more of a label, it's not than an ideology, that's for sure. And I think the important thing about it is it represents different things, very different things, from on the right and on the left. On the right, it seems to me it's very much a blame game in which the juxtaposition of the people who are good and the elites who are bad is in which it's a thing in which the elites use scapegoats that might be Jews or Muslims or Mexicans or perhaps even Brussels bureaucrats. And what you've really got to be aware of in the populism of the right is the people who claim to be the voice of the people. Whether it's Trump or Farage. Trump, for example, says that he only got lent $1 million by his dad, but the New York Times says that actually he benefited to the tune of $400 million from his dad. So, voice of the people, I'm not so sure. On the left, if we are populist, it's because of the way we frame our response to global capitalism and to the ideology of neoliberalism. For the many, not the few, which, by the way, is a phrase that was not invented by Jeremy Corbyn, it was invented by Tony Blair or his advisors. You'll find it in the new Clause 4 of the Labour Party Constitution, is there to explain the differences, the way that capitalism has changed. Because gone are the days when the rather relatively benign capitalism of my youth was able to, demonstrated that British companies still cared about the town's in which their workplaces took place and the workers who worked there to some extent, in which bank managers knew and understood their local communities and economies and cared about them, and in which the state took serious responsibility for economic performance and well-being. Global capitalism today really has no loyalty to people or place at all. Global corporations too often exist beyond the reach of tax authorities and regulators. Governments claim that they believe markets will solve everything, wash their hands of these affairs, and it's not surprising that people feel insecure. On the left, however, democracy really matters. It doesn't on the right, where the voices of the people know all. People have nothing to fear from the populism, if you want to call it that, of the left. They certainly have plenty to fear from the populism of Trump and Farage and from the far right, which is now growing, is a serious threat throughout Europe and the West generally.
John Landsman, thank you. Very clear statement there. And let me turn straight to Michael Howard.
Well, the overarching title of this session is The Will of the People. And the will of the people must prevail. If you believe in democracy, there can't be any other answer than that. Whether populism, and I don't think it's either a right or a left-wing thing, and I think it is a thing, incidentally, whether populism is to be welcomed or feared depends exactly on what you mean by populism, because it means all sorts of things to all sorts of people. There's a reference in our brief, maybe in what you've read, to ideology. Populism is different from ideology. They're not the same things. And I'll be bold enough to offer you a definition, which is that populism is an upsurge of resentment against an elite that is perceived, often correctly, to be out of touch and out of sympathy with the anxieties and the concerns and the frustrations of those people who are resentful. And if that's a reasonable definition, then I don't think it's either to be welcomed or to be feared. I think it's the duty of politicians to engage with it, to recognize that it exists and to try to engage with it. And engaging with it means addressing the concerns that have led to that anxiety and frustration. What do I mean by addressing those concerns? Sometimes you can actually meet them. Sometimes you can identify the grievance and you can actually take policy measures which will ameliorate the concerns that have led to that grievance. Sometimes it's much more difficult and it's either impossible or actually undesirable to meet those grievances, in which case your duty, I think, as a politician is to explain and to persuade exactly why it is that grievance can't actually be met, and explain why perhaps it's a grievance without foundation and the concern underlying it is misplaced, and the policy which is being complained about actually works to the benefit of the people who are complaining. That's obviously not an easy thing to do, but it is part of the leadership of politicians, which is so necessary if populism is not to boil over into the kind of anger which feeds extremes. And I take a dim view of extremes of the right and of the left. And I think one of the reasons why I am so keen that politicians should engage with the concerns of populism is in order to ensure that neither the extremes of the right nor the extremes of the left gain a foothold in power. Of course, it's not simply a concern in this country, it's not simply an issue or a thing in this country, it is something which is apparent pretty well across the Western world. And it's only, in my view, by engaging with it that leaders will prevent the anger from boiling over and will make populism a force for good as part of the overall proposition that the will of the people must prevail.
For more debates, talks and interviews, subscribe today to the Institute of Art and Ideas at IAI TV.